Welcome to the Infowars Nightly News. I'm David Knight. It's Friday, September the 6th, 2013. Now, a lot has happened in the last week. If you remember, about a week ago, last Friday, it is apparent that Obama was going to launch missiles against Syria, probably starting the very next day. He had scheduled a press conference. And we were seeing from CNN how accurate these missiles are going to be. They were talking about how they were going to do, there were surgical strikes. There was going to be very little collateral damage. It's going to be a very limited war. They were talking about how war-weary Obama was, but it wasn't Obama that was weary of war. It was the American people, and they're tired of being lied to. So Obama, desperate to cover up his scandals at home, was trying to find some way to bolster his move, even though he's been deserted by his allies and vetoed by the UN. So he announced that he's going to go before Congress. Now, that's very interesting because in confirmation hearings of Leon Panetta as well as John Kerry, they were openly contemptuous of the idea that they would go and get approval for any kind of war action from Congress. But that's where we are right now. And the question asked by this Infowars story that's actually from Zero Hedge says, are pro-war senators' votes being bought with 80% more defense lobby money? Wednesday's 10-7 vote in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee kind of breaks down along the lines of who's getting the most money from the defense industry, from the military-industrial complex. If you look at this chart here, those on the left in green are the ones who voted for war. Those on the right in red are the ones who said no. They averaged out what these different senators got. And, of course, McCain is getting a huge contribution. He's the one on the far left, the green line on the left. They averaged out the yeses and the nos, and they see that there's 83% more money given to those senators who voted yes. Now, this is something that Zero Hedge has pointed out before, that the most profitable business in the world is lobbying Washington. If you were going to invest in a blue chip stock, you would only get about an 11% return on your investment. But if you do something like lobby Congress for oil subsidies, you get a 5,900% return on your investment. Or with a tax break, 22,000%. Or with drug pricing, you can get a 77,000% increase. That's the way it goes. And so the question is, will Congress be bought or maybe even blackmailed into going along with Obama? If they do, will that alienate an awakening public even more? If they vote against Obama, will he, in order to try to save face, to distract from scandals here at home, will he add to his list of impeachable offenses an attack without congressional authorization? Well, we've got a breakdown from Think Progress, and they're taking a look at the pulse in the House. In the Senate, Obama looks like he may get what he wants in the Senate, but in the House, it's a different story. If we look at this chart from Think Progress, as of yesterday, according to their tally, it looked like there were 49 yes votes and 199 no votes. And you can see in that chart there, the blues are the Democrats and the reds are Republicans. The dark blue are those who are definite or maybe no's. The dark reds are those who are definite or maybe no's on the Republican side. And then those bright colored ones down at the bottom, those are the yeses for war on the Republicans and Democrats, or the leaning towards yes from the Republicans and Democrats. So you can see he's got a lot of room that he needs to make up here, and it doesn't look like at this point he's going to get the authorization from the House. Why is that? I mean, it looks like the Republicans are not willing to fall on the sword in order to save Obama's prestige. And maybe they're not willing to push you or your spouse or your son or your daughter on the sword in order to save Obama's prestige. Well, as you saw in that previous article with the graphic, McCain gets far more money than anybody else on that committee that was voting to move this forward to a full vote. He's getting a lot of pressure from his constituency.
We will respect everyone's view, and if you wait
till... You don't respect our view. We didn't send you to get war for us. We sent you to stop the war.
You can do it by diplomacy and negotiation, not bombs, Senator McCain. We cannot afford to shed more Syrian blood. Personally speaking, I have a cousin who is 18 years old, just was killed 10 days ago by the so-called rebels and Al-Qaeda, and they're not Syrian. They're coming to Syria from all over the world to fight this. We cannot afford to do that. We cannot afford to turn Syria into another Iraq or Afghanistan. I beg you. My family is there. There's so many good Syrians. The majority of the Syrian people want to save their country. And you need to also listen to the majority of the American people who do not want you to go there. This is not an issue that we could take so lightly, Senator McCain. Enough is enough. We do not want another engagement in the Middle East. We don't want Al-Qaeda to take over. We don't, whether you like Bashar al-Assad or not, I am not a fan either.
So what do warmongers like John McCain, those who are selling war to us that we're not buying, what do they do to change our hearts, to win our minds? Well, take a look at this headline as a G20 summit was about to start. Kerry hopes for Russia's change of heart on Syria. Well, Putin wasn't buying any of that. He blatantly called Kerry a liar. He had a different kind of change of heart in mind. You remember back in June, he lectured Cameron on what changing and winning hearts meant to our allies in Syria.
I believe you will not deny the fact that one hardly should back those who kills their enemies and eat their organs and all that is filmed and shot. Do you want to support these people? Do you want to supply arms to these people?
That's right. So when Kerry said that, the world laughed. It wasn't just Putin that was calling him a liar. Everyone knows that he's a liar. So what do they do to win our hearts back? They have to engage in fear-mongering. That brings us to our quote of the day before we talk about what they're possibly going to do. This is the definition of terrorism: the use of violence and intimidation in the pursuit of political aims. Well, at the very least, Lindsey Graham is engaging in fear-mongering. In a report from U.S. News and World Report, he went to South Carolina, to Goose Creek specifically, just outside of Charleston, and they report that his hawkish posture confronts a war-weary voters in South Carolina. Graham says that if there is no response to Syria, Iran will not believe America's resolve to block Iran from developing nuclear weapons. Graham also said those nuclear weapons in the hands of terrorists could result in a bomb coming to Charleston Harbor. And he was characterized by a voter who had come to speak there as absolute fear-mongering. This person who said this said that he was a professed former avid viewer of Fox News and Rush Limbaugh. He said that ending the conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan awoke him to the grim reality of the Middle East and of perpetual war. Yes, people are waking up. Now, in a breaking news story from Infowars today, Senator Graham warns of a nuke strike after missing warheads report. Now, on the same day that Infowars reported that nuclear warheads are being transported from Abilene to South Carolina, Senator Graham made those comments, those fear-mongering comments about a nuclear weapon coming to Charleston Harbor in the belly of a ship. And this is a report that we had 2 days ago at the time that he made this announcement. We reported that Dias is beginning to move out nuclear warheads today. I got a tap from Dermo earlier. He said it was the first time they'd ever even acknowledged since being put there in the 80s that they had nuclear warheads. No signature was required for transfer. There was no directive. He said that Dias commander was on site to give authority to release. No one knew where they were going really, but the truck driver said to take them to South Carolina, and another pickup will take them from there perhaps, okay? So there we have, at the same time we got that information and published that, Lindsey Graham was in South Carolina, near Charleston, scaring people about the idea of nuclear weapons coming to Charleston, coming to South Carolina. Now, Anthony Gucciardi has a follow-up on this.
I'm Anthony Gucciardi, and last Tuesday, myself and Alex Jones delivered an exclusive report on super high-level military intelligence that revealed to us there was a Black Ops-style, unsigned nuclear warhead transfer going on from Dias Air Force Base in Texas to South Carolina. That's all we were told. This is a credible source. We were very concerned. Yesterday night, we got a news tip through the news tip option on our websites that Lindsey Graham had come out and said that if we don't attack Syria, he expects, he fears, and he warns that a nuclear attack could be carried out in South Carolina through some type of boat or something like that. That immediately When I read that, my heart was pounding. We came out with this news. We are actually a little scared. This is the most important thing we may have covered in recent years. And Lindsey Graham is now warning of this nuclear attack. What I'm going to do today is I already called Dyess Air Force Base. They gave me the runaround, told me to call back, told me they were going to call me back as soon as they could. They never called me back. We're going to call not only Dyess Air Force Base and set the record straight, we're going to contact Lindsey Graham in his office, and we are going to ask for answers immediately. We're looking at a potential nuclear attack in the United States, potentially carried out by the U.S. government or elements of the rogue government inside the U.S. government, taking these nuclear weapons, or whoever took them, from Texas, delivering them to South Carolina. This is an exclusive, a massive bombshell report. We're going to call them right now.
Public Affairs, Captain Gillibo.
Hey, how's it going? My name's Anthony Gucciardi. I just wanted to ask you a couple questions if you have the time.
Sure, what's going on?
Great, cool. So, well, a couple days ago on Tuesday, we received intelligence reports and a bunch of stuff we found also coinciding with people in the Dyess area that there was some type of transfer going on to South Carolina from your Air Force base. Do you know anything about that?
What we'll have to do here is you'll have to just let me know all of your questions, and I'm going to have to look into them, and I'm going to have to get back to you.
Well,
so you want to know about some weapons transfers?
Well, actually, I never said anything about weapons. Are you aware of a weapons transfer that must have gone on then?
Let me clarify your questions, and then I'll get them down, and we will have to get back to you.
Well, I'm just wondering if there was a transfer. I didn't say anything about weapons, but was there a weapons transfer going on? It seems to indicate that you were saying there was a weapons transfer of some kind. Let me just give you a little bit about my intelligence on this subject. We know from high-level military sources that we're not going to talk about that there was indeed a nuclear warhead transfer from Dyess Air Force Base. And then we do know on that same day, after we got this intelligence, that Lindsey Graham came out and said in a speech that if we don't attack Syria, there could be a nuclear attack in South Carolina, Charleston. And I also happen to know that the Dyess nuclear warheads were being transferred to South Carolina.
Is there a question there, Anthony?
I am wondering, was there a transfer of any type of weapons, as you seem to have indicated? This is a serious thing. If there are nuclear warheads coming from Dyess Air Force Base to South Carolina, and then Lindsey Graham comes out and says, if we don't attack Syria, then terrorists are going to blow up South Carolina, Charleston, it's a big deal. I actually originally called you on Tuesday, and it was kind of just a little funny thing, like, you know, I knew you wouldn't tell me anything, but this is actually a serious thing. We're talking about a nuclear issue here.
Okay. Well, like I said before, if you just give me your questions, and
that's my question. Was there a transfer of any kind? I asked if there was a transfer. You seem to acknowledge that there might have been a weapons transfer. Was there a weapons transfer of any kind going on to South Carolina?
Do you have a number or an email that I can get back with you?
Well, you have my number. I called you before. You said you would call me back in a timely manner, and there was no call back. And I don't think you're ever going to call me back.
Okay. I think that was somebody else in my office, and I don't believe you left a number with them.
Well, we left the number.
Okay. So will you please give it to me again?
Sure. We'll give you a number. So when are you guys going to give me a call back with some answers?
We can probably get back to you by the end of the day. And you are just looking for the question that I have right now. Was there a transfer?
Was there a transfer of any kind to South Carolina? Mm-hmm. Second question, does Dyess Air Force Base admittedly have nuclear weapons? Third question, are you aware of the fact that Lindsey Graham said there might be a nuclear attack in South Carolina? Fourth question, if there was a transfer, where was it going to?
Hold on. Can you please slow down?
Sure.
The one I left off was, does Dyess have nukes? And what was the question after that?
Was the transfer going to South Carolina?
Okay.
And are you or any of your higher-ups concerned whatsoever that Lindsey Graham says there might be a nuclear strike on South Carolina based on the intel that Dyess Air Force was transporting nuclear warheads to South Carolina just hours before he came out and said that? Yeah, we'd really appreciate you calling us back today. And please, as soon as you physically can do so, please give us a call back.
Okay, we will look into the answers, and we will get back with you. Do you have an email address that works?
Anthony@Infowars.com. I just wanted to ask you one question on a personal basis. Does it trouble you that there is intel of nuclear warheads coming from Daesh hours before Lindsey Graham says that there could be a nuclear strike from terrorists in South Carolina if we don't go to war with Syria. Does that trouble you?
Again, Anthony, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to get back with you on these answers.
Okay, well, we'll talk with you later today. We'll be expecting the call.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks, bye. Well, there it is. This woman, I think it's exactly the same woman I spoke to last Tuesday. No answers. They say they'll call us back. I don't know if they will. If they do, we will have it here on video in another special report, and we'll see what they say to those questions. Of course, they're probably going to say, no, we don't have nukes. There was no transfer. You're crazy. And no, we don't even know what Lindsey Graham's talking about. We never heard about that. But I will try the best I can to pry some information from what they tell us and get to the bottom of the issue and seek truth in news. I'm Anthony Gucciardi. Everyone needs to look at this. Everyone needs to look at these reports. We do know what's going on. The intel is right. This guy's been right time and time again. And it would be one thing if the intel was there, but the other entire thing that turns us into an insane explosion of information is that Lindsey Graham came out just hours later and said that there could be a nuclear attack on South Carolina if we do not go to war with Syria. I'm Anthony Gucciardi. I'll be joining you soon again with another call.
Well, that call was made much earlier today, and as of right now, they have still not called us back. And of course, he called them on Tuesday asking for information. They have not returned any of our calls, giving us any more information about whether that is a real transfer, not verifying that, or whether that is just a coincidence or a drill or what it is. But hopefully, a false flag attack has been avoided. We'll see what happens. Now, with all this talk of war, with all of this movement of troops and planes and ships to the coast of Syria, to try to get our mind off of what's happening here at home, we need to remember that they are still firmly fixed on violating our rights here at home and spying on the American people. We are really in the crosshairs, even more so than Syria. In a report from Wired magazine, yet more revelations about the NSA spying. The NSA's decade-long plan to undermine encryption includes backdoors, stolen keys, manipulating standards. They say without the ability to actually crack the strongest algorithms that protect data, the intelligence agencies have systematically worked to thwart or bypass encryption using a variety of underhanded methods. Part of a highly secretive project codenamed Bull Run has included pressuring vendors to install backdoors in their products to allow intelligence agencies to access data and getting encryption keys by pressuring vendors to hand them over or hacking into systems and stealing them. You know, they talk about this as basically the rubber hose method. It's a way that they can get it, very low-tech way to get it, just brute force, threatening, blackmailing people to put in backdoors into software. And it has a very pernicious effect on everyone. It's not just the government then that has a backdoor into the software. This is what a technology expert says about this. He says the encryption technologies that the NSA has exploited to enable its secret dragnet surveillance are the same technologies that protect our most sensitive information, including medical records, financial transactions, and commercial secrets. And he said that undermining standards and installing backdoors doesn't just allow the government to spy on data, but it creates fundamental insecurities in systems that would allow others to spy on that data as well. The NSA's efforts to secretly defeat encryption are recklessly short-sighted and will further erode not only the U.S.'s reputation as a global champion of civil liberties and privacy, that's laughable at this point, but the economic competitiveness of its largest companies. Now, this is something that was pointed out by Aaron Schwartz. He said that the government is funding these vulnerabilities that they're telling us we need CISPA to cover. But they're the ones who are creating these vulnerabilities. They're the ones who are making the internet unsafe. They're the ones conducting most of the cyber attacks. And as the New American points out, they say, who are the NSA's corporate partners in all of this? In other words, who are the quislings of cyberspace? They say court documents filed by Google and obtained by consumer watchdog. The tech giant, Google, argued that a person has no legitimate expectation of privacy in information that he voluntarily turns over to third parties. Basically, Google claims the right to read the email of all of its customers in order to push ads to them based on keywords in the communication. Now, understand what they said here. I want to repeat that and emphasize that. A person has no legitimate expectation of privacy in information that he turns over to Google or to any third party. That's the position of Google. That's the position of Microsoft. That's the position of all of these corporations, these Quislings who have cooperated with the government. And understand that CISPA was about giving them legal protection so that when they violate your privacy, when they turn this information over, you would not be able to sue them. It wasn't about giving the power to collect that information to the government. The government's been doing that quite some time. They've been getting that information. They've been paying these corporations for that information, and they've been getting it. This is simply to make it, to provide legal protection for these companies, essentially saying that they don't have to get a search warrant because this information that is about you is somehow owned by these third parties, and they can just voluntarily turn that over to you. But look at what some other companies have done. This is something that one guy who had a company, he shut his company down rather than turn over the information. He said, our government can order us to do things that are morally and ethically wrong. They can order us to spy on other Americans and then order us using the threat of imprisonment to keep it all secret. The fellow named Levinson who shut down his email service, his private secure email service. The next day, one of his other competitors, Silent Circle, announced that they would also be suspending their encrypted email service as well. So some people would rather shut down their companies than comply with the government. That is not the case with Google. That's not the case with Microsoft, even though this week they're trying to do essentially a PR game by filing suit against the government, not to make the government stop, but just so that they can save face, so they can tell people, well, we had this many requests and we had to comply with those requests.
Dolphins have been making headlines recently, and it's not because of how freaking cute they are. It's because they're dying in record numbers off the East Coast, and a lot of the dolphins that the researchers are coming into contact with are deaf. Now, they're attributing it to climate change, maybe viruses, but my guest today has many documents showing that it's a much bigger issue that the military-industrial complex and fracking enthusiasts might not want you to concern yourself with. From sonar, lasers, electromagnetic weapons systems, oil fracturing, drilling, ocean construction, and bomb blasts, the noise issue is tremendous, and that list is growing every year. All right, well, hello, Rosalind. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, you're quite welcome. It's an honor and a privilege to be here with you.
Well, so let's launch right into the issue of the deafening dolphins. So this article says that Navy testing may be an issue. It's kind of way at the bottom of the article. But all the documents that you sent to me kind of show that they already know that Navy testing and sonar and all the noise is definitely an issue.
Yes, it is, and especially with the Navy expanding all of its operations to cover almost the entire Atlantic seaboard, the Gulf of Mexico, and the Hawaiian Islands all the way to Southern California, and then up the entire coastal region of the West Coast all the way to Alaska. And what's happening with the sonar use, lasers, bomb blasts, we're actually in destroying habitat. We're also destroying, in other words, their breeding grounds, their feeding grounds, and possibly their food supplies for a whole host of marine mammals and fish. And the deaf dolphins that are being discussed now that are beaching themselves on the shoreline and dying, among other things, are possibly one cause from all the Navy sonar exercises and other types of exercises that are ongoing and have been for the last few years.
Well, so how are they getting around the Marine Mammal Protection Act of 1972? How are they getting around that to get permission to do all of this testing when they kind of have evidence that it's having adverse effects?
Because the National Marine Fisheries Service and NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, are working as partners with the Navy. There is no oversight. So what they're doing is NOAA and the National Marine Fisheries Service are just rubber stamping the request by the Navy while requiring the Navy only to have mitigation measures effective 9% of the time, according to U.S. Congressman Thompson.
And so one of the documents that you sent to me, they were testing blue whales, but blue whales are an endangered species, so how are they allowed to do these incidental tests on them?
Well, it's not an incidental test. It just says that Navy activities, they call them incidental testing and incidental activities, but they're not incidental because the U.S. Navy knows fully well that they have impacts. And we know from research and studies that there are impacts on the largest whale on the Pacific coast, the blue whale, and we know that they're not recovering. So for the National Marine Fisheries Service and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration to allow this to continue, and the Navy harassment and endangering them with bomb blasts and noise is absolutely despicable, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Well, there are people that agree with you as well. And so the document, it talks about, with the incidental testing, I guess that's tricky how they word everything, they say they're allowed to take a certain amount of marine mammals. What does that mean?
Yes, under federal law, take, the definition of take, T-A-K-E, is to harass, harm, pursue, hunt, shoot, wound, kill, trap, capture, collect, or attempt to engage in any such conduct. And what happens is that under a take, most people don't know what a take is, and so therefore people think that this is, well, they're just going to take a few of them. But the problem is that when they conduct their sonar activities or their bomb blasts, they hit everything in the region that they're doing the testing in, and they're testing in so many areas, from the Hawaiian Islands all the way across to the Atlantic and the coast of Maine, and then down to Florida and over to Texas along the Gulf. There are no places where these marine mammals won't be affected from all of the different military testing that's being conducted in these entire areas. And for a map of the areas, if you go to my website, agriculturedefensecoalition.org, you will see the U.S. Navy maps of these areas and how extensive they are, where testing is allowed.
Right, and we actually have some NASA docs that have been from like the year 2000, but they're circulating right now, and they are really specific that the water is sort of an untapped war zone. And so there's a lot more of equipment that's being tested. It's not just the sonar that is affecting all the marine life that's out there. So many fish and dolphins and whales and things are beaching themselves and dying in record numbers. There's all kinds of equipment being tested. So it's not a wonder that the Navy is somehow trying to get around the Environmental Protection Act.
That is absolutely correct. And what happens is that the full extent of all their activities and the impacts are starting to be felt, but the powers that be don't want to talk that it's a Navy problem with all their activities, and this includes exploding hundreds and hundreds, thousands actually, when you consider all the Atlantic, Pacific, and Gulf of Mexico. But you've got missiles, gunnery exercises, bombing exercises, sinking exercises, mine warfare training, and all the other activities involved with laser, sonars, and their full range of activities, even experimental weapons testing. And the full impact of that in all the ocean areas is tremendous.
Yeah, and we have yet to see and feel the full effects, the results, if they've just been doing this, for a decade, and now we're seeing all of these creatures dying in record numbers. It's kind of an indication of where it's headed. And so it's not also just military testing, they're also doing oil digging, and now fracking is an issue. We have a report up that California coastal regulators said they were unaware that the oil companies that were out there were fracking. So they don't even know this stuff is going on. How are they even supposed to regulate it?
If they don't know that it's not going on, they can't possibly regulate it. And also, the Shell Oil and other oil companies are using advanced sonar technology also to conduct their activities. So they're also creating noise in the ocean and creating different types of circumstances where marine mammals would be impacted on a great level. And with no regulation and no one knowing, they certainly don't haven't been able to have our congressmen or our senators even engage in a conversation that you can't add this to Navy testing and say that it's okay for our marine mammals.
Exactly. They're just not even allowing them to have the research by just avoiding altogether, letting them know that they're dumping fluids and hundreds of chemicals that are involved with the fracking and just releasing it into the ocean. And there's no testing, there's no evidence, there's no regulation. So we don't even know what's going to happen. Now, you mentioned some members of Congress, and I know that there are quite a few of them that have been pretty vocal in letting the administration know that there is some real concern here. I think you mentioned one of them said there was going to be 2.5 million sea creature deaths this year, or?
Well, let me give you a letter from 7 senators and U.S. Congressman Henry Waxman, and I'll just read you a short quote of the letter that they wrote in concern about Navy programs. Quote, "In many regions, the Navy plans to increase the number of its exercises or expand the areas in which they may occur, and virtually every coastal state will be affected. Some exercises may occur in the nation's most biologically sensitive marine habitats, including national marine sanctuaries and breeding habitats. In all, the Navy anticipates more than 2.3 million takes. Significant disruptions in marine mammal foraging, breeding, and other essential behaviors per year, or 11.7 million takes over the course of a 5-year permit." And what happens is they have 12 of these warfare exercises ranges now in operation, with more planned in the next year.
Well, so what can people do? Is there anything going through Congress right now that people can vote on? What can people do to stop this, to alert their congressmen that they're concerned?
Well, there's a toll-free number for all your elected representatives in Washington, D.C., and that number is 1-866-22-00044. That's 1-866-22-00044. And you can ask for any elected representatives and let them know. You can visit my website, agriculturedefensecoalition.org, and you can support an environmental organization called Earth Justice in San Francisco, who has been working hard and also has a lawsuit against the Navy at this time. You can join them as well, and I hope everyone will. And if you visit my website, there are petitions on my website that you can sign and send back to me, because we hand deliver them every year or several times a year, depending, to our elected representatives in Washington, D.C.
Very good.
All the things that are happening in all of our ocean areas are having a definite impact on the food supply for the fish we eat. They're having a definite impact on all marine mammals. And what we have to do is we have to put pressure on our elected officials at this time to really take action to save our marine mammals and protect them, and to stop excessive noise and live fire exercises. The Navy doesn't have to practice with live bombs and blow up 1,000-pound, 500-pound, 2,000-pound bombs in the ocean just to prove a point on what may happen when they explode it, because they've already done enough of that type of testing. So we really have to get the Navy to not use live fire exercises in all areas of the Pacific, Atlantic, and the Gulf of Mexico, as well as Hawaiian Islands and other areas.
Right, and it's also the U.S. Air Force.
Yes, the U.S. Air Force asked for a permit to actually drop bombs on the manatee area in Florida, where they had their breeding habitat. And this cannot just go on. We know what the bombs do when they drop. We have warfare land ranges for testing. There's no reason to have these kind of exercises dropping bombs into the Pacific Ocean or the Gulf of Mexico or the Atlantic.
Absolutely. There definitely isn't. And I grew up on the beach, so dolphins and manatees are very near and dear to my heart. So this really, it really upsets me when I read these articles. So Rosalind, thank you so much for everything you're doing with the Agriculture Defense Coalition. I appreciate your time, and we'll definitely direct everyone to your website. And now that we're up for the midterm elections, it's like the most important time to call your congressperson and let them know that you demand they take action, or you're not going to re-elect them.
Well, the other thing is that when they have their town hall meetings, this is when to pressure them into talking about the Navy and these issues when they come home to visit. And, you know, we actually said to our congressman, we're not going to vote for you in the next election, you know, unless you make this your issue for us and defend our marine mammals off our coast. So everyone can do this. You can take action and you can make a difference, especially if we raise our voices together. And please feel free to contact me. My contact information is on the website, agriculturedefensecoalition.org, if you need additional information.
Okay, we sure will. Thank you so much, Rosalind.
Thank you.
Now, thank you all so much for tuning in. Meet us here every weeknight at 7 p.m. Central for the Infowars Nightly News. I'm Ann McAdoo.